The call came at 11:47 p.m. on the night before my son's wedding. I know the exact time because I'd been awake, sitting in the small chair by the window of my hotel room, watching the parking lot lights flicker. I wasn't crying. I'd already done that 3 weeks earlier when my son Marcus told me, very gently, very carefully, that he thought it would be better if I didn't sit at the head table during the reception. It's just easier, he'd said. For everyone. I didn't ask who everyone meant, I already knew. Her name was Joanna. Marcus had been with her for 2 years. She was 31, worked in real estate, and had a way of laughing at things that weren't funny that made me feel like I was missing a joke only she understood. I'd tried. I want to be clear about that. I'd tried with Joanna the way you try with someone you know is going to be in your life whether you want them to be or not. I brought wine to their apartment the first time I was invited. I remembered her birthday. I asked about her work even when she talked about it in a way that left no room for questions. None of it landed. By the time Marcus called to tell me about the head table, I think I'd already accepted that Joanna didn't like me. What I hadn't accepted, what I couldn't quite make fit, was that Marcus had started to see me through her eyes. I am a nurse. Was a nurse, technically. I'd taken a position as a nurse manager at Riverside Regional about 4 years before, so I spent more time with spreadsheets than patients, but I'd spent 22 years on the floor before that. Cardiac. I mention this only because it's relevant later, and because I think it explains something about how I carry myself. When you've worked cardiac for 2 decades, you learn to keep your voice even when everything inside you is not even at all. So when Marcus told me about the head table, I said, okay. And when Joanna sent me a message 2 weeks later, saying she hoped I understood that the seating arrangement wasn't personal, just a way to keep the energy calm, I said, of course. And when I drove 4 hours to Charlottesville, checked into a hotel 30 minutes from the venue because the room block at the nicer hotel was already full, though I'd asked about it in February, I told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine, but it was manageable. I knew how to manage things. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday night. I hadn't been invited to that either. Joanna's family was hosting it at a restaurant downtown, and the guest list was immediate family and the wedding party. Marcus had called to tell me this with the careful tone he used when he knew something was wrong, but had decided it wasn't his problem to fix. You understand, Mom? It's her parents' event. I understand, I said. So I ordered room service, a turkey sandwich and a cup of soup I barely touched. I watched the local news and then a home renovation show, and then I turned the television off and sat by the window and listened to the parking lot. That's where I was at 11:47 when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I thought it was going to be Marcus calling to check in the way he sometimes did when his guilt got heavy enough to make him reach for his phone. But the name on the screen wasn't Marcus. It was my daughter-in-law. His new wife technically as of the next day, Joanna. I stared at the screen for 2 full rings. She never called me. In 2 years she had texted me exactly 4 times, and each time it was something practical. An address, a start time, a link to Marcus's gift registry. She had never called. I answered. Beverly? Her voice was strange. Tight and high at the same time, like she'd been trying to sound calm and had almost gotten there. Is this Beverly? It is, I said. Joanna, is everything okay? A pause. Then, do you know someone at the IRS? I sat up straighter. I'm sorry? The IRS. Do you have a contact there? Or I don't know, someone you've worked with? Or someone who might have? She stopped. I heard her breathing. There are 2 agents here. At the rehearsal dinner, they asked for Kevin. Kevin was her father. I set down my soup spoon. What did they say? They didn't say anything to me. They asked the hostess for Kevin Aldrich, and then they went to the back of the restaurant with him, and Marcus went too, and I've been sitting at the table for 20 minutes, and nobody's telling me anything, and I didn't know who else to call. I didn't know why she'd called me. I still don't, entirely. I think when something terrifying happens in a crowded room and you can't show it on your face, sometimes you reach for the person who seems least likely to panic. Maybe that was what I represented to her. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or sad about it. Okay, I said. Take a breath. You're at the dinner, you're safe, nothing is happening to you. What do you know about why they'd be there? Nothing. I swear I don't know anything. But her voice had shifted slightly when she said it. Not lying, exactly. More like someone who has a door in their mind that they've been keeping closed and can feel it starting to move. Is Marcus with his father-in-law now? Yes, they've been back there for, hold on. Another pause. 23 minutes. Okay, you don't have to do anything right now. Just stay calm and let it play out. If Marcus needs you, he'll come get you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I found something about 3 months ago, something in my father's office." But I told myself it was probably nothing. I waited. There was a folder, Medicare billing statements, for patients I didn't recognize, and some of them, the dates were wrong. Like procedures on days my dad was out of town. I thought maybe it was a filing mistake. My dad has been in medical billing for 30 years. He knows what he's doing. I didn't want to. She stopped. "You didn't want to look too closely," I said. "No. Here is the part I haven't talked about much, even now." When Joanna said medical billing, I felt something go cold in my chest. Not because of her father. I didn't know Kevin well enough to have a strong opinion about him. What I felt was older than that. More personal. 18 months before Marcus's wedding, I'd been contacted by someone from our hospital's compliance office. A routine audit had flagged a series of billing discrepancies, procedures billed under my nursing license that I had not performed. The amounts were small enough individually that they'd slipped through for almost 2 years before the pattern caught someone's attention. It wasn't a criminal investigation, not at that point, but it was serious. I'd spent 4 months providing documentation, pulling shift records, writing statements. 4 months of feeling like I was defending my entire career with paper. In the end, the discrepancies were traced to an outside billing contractor the hospital had been using. Not to me. My name was cleared completely. But those 4 months left a mark. I knew in a way I hadn't before how easy it was for your name to end up on the wrong document. I had never told Marcus about it. I hadn't wanted him to worry, and by the time it was resolved, it felt like something I'd survived privately and preferred to keep that way. "Joanna," I said. "What was the name on those billing statements?" She was quiet for a long moment. "They were issued through a company called Aldrich Medical Consulting," she finally said. "My dad set it up as a side business. He said it was just administrative work for small practices, and the patient names on the statements, were they real patients? Did you recognize any of them?" Another silence, longer, some of them, yes. I closed my eyes. I knew what that meant. I'd lived through a version of it, a smaller version, and I knew how those pieces fit together. Billing for procedures under real patient records, real provider credentials, services that were never rendered. Medicare fraud. It's not rare, and it's not small. The Department of Justice recovers billions a year from it, and that's only what they catch. "Okay," I said. "I need you to listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong by not reporting it immediately when you didn't know what you were looking at. But if agents are there right now, this is already further along than a question. They don't show up at rehearsal dinners for audits." She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Is there a lawyer in your family? Or a family friend who's an attorney? My uncle is a corporate lawyer. Call him. Right now, before Marcus comes back, before anyone says anything else to the agents. Tell him what you told me and ask him to make some calls tonight." What about Marcus? I thought about my son. About the way he'd said, "It's just easier," and meant it. And about the way he was probably standing in the back of that restaurant right now, watching the life he thought he was building look suddenly different from the outside. "Marcus is going to be okay," I said. "He didn't know about this." "He didn't," she said quickly. "I promise he had no idea. I believe you." And I did. Not because Joanna was especially trustworthy in my experience, but because I knew my son. Marcus didn't have the stomach for dishonesty. He got squeamish watching true crime documentaries. "Beverly," her voice cracked a little, "just once. I'm sorry about the head table, about some other things." I looked out the window at the parking lot. A car was pulling in, slowly, headlights sweeping across the pavement. "Let's get through tonight," I said. "We'll figure out the rest later." She hung up to call her uncle. I sat with my phone in my lap. I want to tell you that I felt vindicated. I want to say that some part of me thought, there it is, there's the thing I felt but couldn't name. But that's not what I felt. What I felt was tired and a little sad. Because Marcus was going to wake up the next day and get married and stand at an altar, and it was supposed to be the happiest day. And somewhere in the background of it, something was unraveling that he hadn't asked for and didn't deserve. That's the part people miss, sometimes, when they talk about justice. Justice doesn't only fall on the people who earned it. The wedding happened. I know that might surprise you, given everything. But it did. Kevin Aldrich spent about 45 minutes in the back of that restaurant with the IRS agents, and then came out looking like a man who had aged a decade and a half in less than an hour. He made his toast at the rehearsal dinner, I heard about this later, with the careful stillness of someone who has just been told to behave normally and is doing his best. His wife, Joanna's mother, didn't know. Or if she did, she was a better actor than Kevin. I found all of this out in pieces over the following weeks from Marcus. The wedding itself was quiet for me. I sat at a table near the back with Marcus's college friends and a cousin I'd always liked. And I watched my son say vows to a woman I didn't entirely know, and I thought about the night my ex-husband and I got married in a church in Roanoke, with 30 people in attendance, and how certain everything felt. How much certainty is a kind of blindness when you're young. Joanna looked beautiful. I mean that sincerely. She wore a dress with long sleeves, and her hair was up, and she cried during the vows in a way that was genuine. I can tell the difference after 22 years in nursing. The crying wasn't performance. She loved my son. Whatever else was complicated, that part was real. Marcus hugged me at the reception. A long hug, longer than our usual, and he said into my shoulder, "Thank you for being here. Not sorry exactly, but something." "I wouldn't have missed it," I said, which was true. Joanna and I didn't speak much that night. She caught my eye once across the room and gave me a look that I didn't have a name for. Not gratitude, exactly, more like recognition. Like two people who have been in different rooms of the same house and have just realized they were in the same house all along. The investigation became real in September. Kevin Aldrich was indicted on 11 counts of healthcare fraud and 1 count of money laundering. The billing scheme had been running for 6 years. The total amount billed fraudulently was just under $2.3 million, largely through Medicare. He'd set up the consulting company as a pass-through, billing for services under credentials borrowed, without authorization, from small private practices he did legitimate work for. Some of those practices had no idea. 2 of them had to hire their own lawyers to prove they hadn't been involved. One of the practices was a cardiology group in Roanoke. I had done per diem work for that practice twice, about 3 years before. My name, my nursing license number, appeared in 14 of the fraudulent billing records, for procedures I had never performed. On days I could prove, with time cards and patient notes from Riverside Regional, that I had been somewhere else entirely. When Marcus called to tell me this, he'd heard it from Joanna, who'd heard it from her mother, who was now cooperating with prosecutors. His voice was very quiet. "Mom," he said, "your name is in the records." "I know," I said. "I was already contacted." Silence. "You already knew?" "I'd been told, yes, a few days ago." "Why didn't you?" He stopped, started again. "Are you okay? Is this going to be a problem for you?" "My license is clear," I said. "I have documentation for every date in question. My attorney has already been in contact with the prosecutor's office." Another silence, longer. "You have an attorney?" "I do." "Mom." Something in his voice shifted. Not the careful, managed tone he'd been using with me for the past couple of years. Something older. Younger, maybe. "Why didn't you tell me?" And here is what I said. I've thought about it since, and I'd say the same thing again. "Because you had enough on your plate. And because I've been managing my own problems for a long time, Marcus. I didn't want to hand you one you couldn't fix." He was quiet for a while after that. I heard him breathing. Somewhere in the background, I could hear Joanna moving around, the sound of a cabinet closing. "She feels terrible," he said. "Joanna. She found that folder and didn't say anything, and then your name." "Joanna did what a lot of people would do," I said. "You don't want to believe something like that about your father. That's not weakness, that's love." "She said you told her to call an attorney that night." "At the rehearsal dinner, I did." "Why did she call you?" He said it, like he'd been turning the question over for a long time and still hadn't found where it fit. "She could have called anyone." I thought about it. About the parking lot outside my hotel window. About the cold soup. About all the careful okays I'd said over 2 years. "I think she called me," I said slowly, "because she knew I'd stay calm. And maybe because somewhere underneath everything, she trusted me more than she realized." Marcus didn't say anything for a long time. "Then I should have had you at the head table." I laughed. It came out a little wobbly. "Yeah," I said, "you should have, Mom. It's okay, Marcus, I mean that. We're going to be okay." Kevin Aldrich pleaded guilty in February. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution plus interest. The 2 practices whose credentials he'd misused received formal clearance from the Department of Justice. My name was included in the prosecutorial summary as a misappropriated credential, a victim, not a participant. My nursing license has never had a single mark on it. I went back to work the Monday after the sentencing was announced. Same office, same spreadsheets, same coffee from the machine in the third-floor break room that always tastes slightly like the cup before it. A colleague congratulated me. I thanked her and went back to my desk. A few weeks later, Joanna called me. Not a text, a call. "I want to take you to lunch," she said. "If you're willing." We went to a Thai place she liked, near their apartment. We sat across from each other at a small table by the window and ordered pad thai and a shared appetizer, and we talked about Marcus, about their apartment, about a trip they were thinking about taking to Portugal. Normal things. The kind of things you talk about when you're trying to build something from scratch and aren't quite sure yet what shape it's going to take. At the end of the meal, she set down her fork and looked at me. "I need to say something," she said, "and I need you to let me say the whole thing before you respond." "Okay. I wasn't fair to you. I think I decided who you were before I knew you, and then I spent 2 years looking for evidence that I was right. And I found things that looked like evidence, but mostly I think I was just looking hard enough." "The head table thing?" She shook her head. "That was wrong. I knew it at the time. I convinced Marcus it was the right call, and I knew on some level that it wasn't." I looked at my water glass. "And then that night, at the dinner, the first person I thought to call was you, and I think that says something that I've been sitting with." "It does," I said. "I'm sorry, Beverly, for the head table and for making you feel like you weren't welcome in Marcus's life." I looked up at her. Joanna had dark circles under her eyes that she hadn't bothered to conceal. And she was holding her fork very tightly even though she'd set it down, and she looked like a person who had recently had her understanding of her family completely rearranged, and was doing her best to still show up for things. I understood that feeling. "I accept your apology," I said, "and I want you to know, I don't need us to be best friends. I'm not looking for that. But I would like for us to be honest with each other, because Marcus loves us both, and that means we're going to be in the same room for a long time." She nodded. Her eyes got bright for a second and then she blinked it away. "I can do honest," she said. "Good," I said. "So can I." We split the check. She left the tip. Marcus called me that evening to ask how lunch went. "Good," I said. "Really good, actually." "Yeah?" I could hear him smiling, the relief in it. "Yeah. She's going to be okay, Marcus. You picked someone who can admit when she's wrong. That matters more than people think." He laughed. "A real one, not the careful managed kind." "That's a very nurse thing to say, probably." I walked to the window. The sky outside was starting to go pink and orange, one of those late February sunsets that shows up without warning. "Come visit soon, both of you." "We will," he said. "I promise." I believed him. I don't believe everything, and I'm not the kind of woman who pretends the past 2 years didn't happen just because the ending came out okay. There are still things between Marcus and me that we haven't fully said, spaces we haven't walked back into yet. That's real, and I don't want to flatten it. But I stood at my window and watched the sun go down, and I thought about Kevin Aldrich sitting in a federal processing facility somewhere, and I thought about the folder Joanna had found, and the door she'd kept closed, and I thought about my own 4 months 3 years ago, writing statements and pulling records and staying calm in a way that nobody around me knew cost me anything. I hadn't gone looking for justice. I hadn't made calls or sent emails or tried to make anyone's life harder. I had just kept my record straight and told the truth when I was asked and kept showing up. That was enough. It turned out that was exactly enough. I smiled a little at the window. The sun was mostly gone now, just a strip of orange left at the edge. I went and made myself a cup of tea and I sat down, and for the first time in a long time the quiet felt like mine.